game changer, because for the first time countries will be able to report on a map where their targets are, where the implemented actions are, and ultimately track progress toward those targets. The second point is about, again, reporting false positive negative processes and the importance of that. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. And the importance of that in being able to recalculate the SDG 1531 estimate. And finally, the option to report a national land cover legend under Trends in Land Cover offers flexibility for national circumstances. Next slide, please. So why are all these changes important? I'm sure you have some opinions on this, but at the Secretariat, we believe that we have really embraced big data, cutting-edge IT systems, and the power of the internet to make a real difference in assisting country parties meet their reporting obligations. Through the examples I've shown you, through creation of spatial data on the platform, we feel we can move now more toward evidence-based decision-making, and we encourage parties to really make use of those tools, share data towards that endeavor as we increase the knowledge base. One more slide, please. You might be wondering what comes next after reporting is concluded. Well, after reporting is finished, we plan to launch a web portal that will grant public users a unique insight into the reporting data. It will feature a global space where common questions about our mission and mandate can be answered through data. For example, data dashboards, online visualizations, and interactive maps. We also will have data-driven country profiles. We feel this is a novel and a major step on our journey from data to better knowledge on land, while showing the impact of the convention through reported data. With that, Jean-Marc, I hope your stress levels are lower, because I'm already finished. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you. A round of applause, please. 8 minutes, exactly. That's fantastic. Thank you very much, and that's very brilliant. And you know, we have been discussing a while in this convention about several issues, but if there is a kind of advance with other partners and agreement and way of doing, it's probably on reporting. You are doing an amazing job, so thank you very much for that. Please, without any further discussion, please, Alex Vollet from Conservation International about Trend Earth. Thank you. So the next PowerPoint slide, if you are able to load it, please. Si vous pouvez mettre la présentation suivante, s'il vous plaît.
Definitely, thank you, and thank you, Jean-Marc. Again, my name's Alex Wolof. I'm a scientist from Conservation International. I was hoping you'd get done early, Brian, and then I could take the excuse of going over, but so it goes. But I'm here to talk to you about some of the additions and innovations we made in Trends.Earth over the past few years, and of course with GEF support, as was mentioned earlier, through the Enabling Activities program. If we could go to the next slide. So again, just as some background, many of you may be familiar with Trends.Earth, but if you're not, it was initially developed by Conservation International and many partners in support of the last round of UNCCD reporting. We received further support from the GEF to build on the work that we started in the past and to build towards some of the innovations that I'll share with you today. And one thing in particular that I want to highlight is through so the project is called Tools for LDN, Tools for Land Degradation Neutrality. But a key focus of this project has been, of course, as I mentioned, I'll focus on reporting here today, but a key focus of the project overall has been to build towards integration of the range of tools that are needed to support country reporting. And so two key tools that we built on through this project were to build better linkages between Trends.Earth, Land PKS, or Land Potential Knowledge System, and then also WOCAT. So a number of innovations there that I want to highlight. And of course, the goal here overall, again, is really to facilitate country reporting through the ability to integrate information sources from a range of different tools. If we could go to the next slide. So Trends.Earth itself is a free and open source tool focused, as I mentioned before, very much towards monitoring and facilitating reporting on land degradation and improvement. So the key goal of the tool really is to facilitate both reporting to UNCCD as well as some of the indicators associated with the GEF and with global environmental benefits. There's some other indicators that we assess as well. We've worked with UN Habitat to build in functionalities around urbanization. We also have the ability to project potential carbon sequestration from different types of restoration projects. What I'm going to focus on here today, though, is really the functionalities around reporting. We can go to the next slide. So just to highlight, we've had a broad range of users. We had the ability through the last round of UNCCD reporting and in partnership with the GEF and with UNCCD Secretariat to conduct a range of trainings around the world to reach country parties. At the end, I'll speak a little bit about what we have planned in this round, of course, a little different due to the pandemic. And also just to highlight, you see a lot of logos on there. We have many different partners that we've engaged with in this process. Next slide. So what have we done around reporting in terms of innovations to facilitate this round? As was already mentioned, there have been some updates to the core indicators within Trends.Earth, particularly those around Strategic Objective 1, so the LDN indicators. We've also added additional indicators to the tool to facilitate reporting on Strategic Objective 2 and 3. So that's drought, hazard, vulnerability, and exposure, and then also population affected by degradation. And then also, and this is functionality, this course is, I'm sure, of key interest to parties, but Trends.Earth can support the integration of national level data sets or subnational data with the global data sets that are provided as the default data. So of high value, particularly in countries like, as we had about earlier, in small island states where there may be a need, for example, for higher resolution data sets. Skip to the next slide. So I just want to quickly show you what this looks like in the tool. I'll spare you a long training, Jean-Marc. But just in terms of what is available in the tool, of course, you can calculate a baseline of degradation. This is showing 2000 to 2015 data in Trends.Earth. One thing you may notice if you've used the tool before is there's actually an all-new interface that we've developed, which should hopefully be much easier for users to use. Next slide. What you can do in the tool is, of course, now, and this is important for the reporting cycles, you can calculate status of land in 2019, and this is what's needed to feed directly into praise. Next slide. And then also something we're excited about is there's the ability to directly export information from Trends.Earth for import into the Praise 4 system that Brian presented earlier. And so this should be much easier for countries than in the last round when we had the PDF forms that were used for reporting. Next slide. Also, as I mentioned before, we've partnered closely with the Land PKS and WOCAT teams, and it's probably hard to read from where you are, but what you'll see on the screen is a number of screenshots of the Land PKS, Land Potential Knowledge Systems app. What you see on the left-hand side is direct integration with the WOCAT database. So what this means is that it's possible to go into the field and based on information about the point that you're at, actually draw on information from the WOCAT database to understand some of the different SLM technologies that might be appropriate for an area. We've also integrated within that app data from Trends.Earth. So it's possible on your phone in the field, as you see in those right-hand two screens, rather, you can see information pulled directly from Trends.Earth. So really making that link directly from the ground all the way through to what you can view from remotely sensed imagery. Next slide. So if we could skip to the next. So then two things, and these relate actually to what Brian mentioned earlier. What you see on the screen here is just like in Praise 4, where Brian mentioned you can flag false positives and negatives. This functionality is being added to Trends.Earth. Next slide. And then also, and I'm going through this quickly because Brian just covered it, but within Trends.Earth, you can also customize land cover legends such that if there's a more detailed national land cover map or different classes than may be used represented in the standard 7 IPCC classes, it's possible to calculate statistics based on those. Next slide. Another thing that we've been developing, and again, this is through the Tools for LDN project, is support for higher level resolution products. So what you can see on screen here is, again, so we've been working with Colombia very closely in our piloting activities. On the left-hand side, you can see the standard data sets that come out of Trends.Earth. That's a 250-meter resolution. And then on the right-hand side, it's zooming into a small area around Yorimel, which is in northern Colombia. And what you see on the bottom is the same area, but using Sentinel-2 imagery. So of course, much higher degree of detail possible in these data sets. There's some caveats about their use, which I could go into if countries are interested in this data, but it's slightly different time periods than we have for other data sets. So there's some limitations, but still a very exciting area, particularly again for smaller countries, for SIDS, etc. Next slide. And this is just one more example of what that data looks like. So here, this is the area around Buenos Aires and Montevideo. And you can see, of course, much higher degree of detail is visible in these data sets. And I think that's all I have. Next slide. Oh, and sorry, just one more thing to highlight. As Brian mentioned, these are very large data sets. This is actually now a little bit out of date. But just to show you, we are pulling these data sets globally. They are huge. They're much finer resolution than what countries have worked with before, which just brings different challenges in terms of how to actually process that data, handle it, etc. But very exciting developments soon to come. Next slide. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Excellent. Exactly 8 minutes. Really. No, really, I should apologize. I'm very sorry that I was a little bit scared. But you know, my colleagues very often say that you know, I have a professional deformation. I've developed too many programs and projects, and I'm problem-oriented, you know. So for me, everything is a problem to solve. So I'm starting to identify the problems and then find solutions. I should start with the good points and the lessons, you know. I'm not enough political. I should start with the good points and the lessons and the assets. And you have done a fantastic job. I'm done talking about the presentation. I'm talking about really the ground and the software and another point. It's completely amazing. 180 countries, 5,000 users. I'm very thrilled to see the next steps with the Global Support Program and the regional workshops. I hope we have some of them physically, and all this partnership with WOCAT, with Land PKS. We have had a lot of discussion with them. Excellent. So the next PowerPoint presentation will be from Kat Chamberlain, but before that, I would like to know if Aurélie Bress from FAO is here. Not sure. Or if Chris Magero from IUCN is here. Yes, because I mentioned in my presentation earlier that there was some global project under preparation or just starting, so it's too soon to influence all the reporting process and provide capacities and tools, but very soon these projects are going to provide tools, mechanism, knowledge, resources for the countries. So from your seat, Chris, if you can explain what IUCN is preparing right now with a GEF grant of $2 million. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Jean-Marc, and I will be just straight and to the point. Under the Land Degradation Neutrality Target Setting Program that was before, 129 countries already committed to setting the targets, and we supported again through a project that was implemented by the GM, the Global Mechanism of the UNCCD, and funded by GEF, the target setting program. And this particular program gave targets to a number of actions from the countries, which went into a diversity of landscapes. So we talk about forests, rangelands, croplands, grasslands, which are in various states of degradation. This particular, okay.
Okay, thank you. I hope that is better. So just to go back one step, I was pointing out that IUCN implemented a project on land degradation neutrality, which was executed by the Global Mechanism of the UNCCD and funded by the GEF. Under this program, 129 countries committed to set the targets, the LDN targets. This particular project we're now developing is looking at moving these targets into action. So the good thing with the LDN is that it covers quite a number of landscapes, ecosystems. So whether it's forests, rangelands, croplands, all this under different states of degradation. And this particular project will be looking at supporting the countries to implement this concept further. The concept itself around LDN looks at enhancing the capacities of the countries in land use planning. So what goes into the national plans, and how can we support gender responsive planning in that? It will also be looking at assessing the LDN implementation within the countries in order to identify what are the gaps and how can we strengthen those gaps in terms of implementation. And last and not least, it will be looking at facilitating gender transformative LDN investments, which gender is, one of the key enablers of LDN investment. So this is, again, a 2 million project that will be funded in the next coming months. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. Very useful and very complimentary of all what we have been doing. So I would like to keep some time, of course, for the discussion, but Kat, if you can join us. So Kat Chamberlain is preparing a postdoc on impact forecasting. And I would like to go back to, some guidance or direction that the GEF CEO, did at the first side event we had with the GEF. We had a vision for the next 2 GEF cycles. It's a vision by 2030 and by 3050. We have no choice. We need to succeed. We have 2 GEF cycles to change the trajectory. So being nature positive by 2030 and being climate neutral by 2050. So it means we need to be sure that every dollar of the GEF will generate multiple benefits for carbon, for nature, for land, for people. This is why a large part of the GEF 8 investment are under integrated approaches, integrated programs to have these multiple benefits. So of course it will be very interesting in the future to see how to operationalize this integrated approach and also how to monitor the results. And in this framework, I guess it was kind of interesting to have this discussion. So it's a little bit out of the convention context. It's a broader discussion about where we are going and about the notion of return of investment and the value for money, actually, which is very important for the GF, but much more important for the donors. We want to be sure that the money, each dollar at the GF will be well used for impact, multiple benefit, and transformation. So Kat, please. You can applaud.
Thank you, Jean-Marc, for that introduction. My name is Kat Chamberlain. I'm also from Conservation International, and if we could get the slides up there. And today, as Jean-Marc introduced, I will be talking about impact forecasting work that we've done around land use planning. Oop. Press the wrong button. So we will be we've started our work under the Sustainable Land Management Practices Response Hierarchy. We're focusing on avoiding land degradation, reducing and reversing land degradation. And then we are nesting each of these different parts of the hierarchy across different land types. So we're thinking about forests, we're thinking about agriculture land, and also about wetlands. Next slide. Thank you. So what we're interested in is seeing how different funded actions across land use patterns and changes are impacting these 3 major indicators of biodiversity conservation, climate solutions, and socioeconomic impacts. Today we'll just be focusing on climate solutions since that's mostly where we have the data, and I only have a few minutes. Next, please. And next slide. Our data right now is just focused on Brazil. We have a lot of data from the GEF, also from the World Bank, Europe Aid, the CEPF. And we have intervention data at various counties within Brazil. Here we can see the forest cover from 1987 until 2020, and overlaid are these black polygons representing sites where we have some sort of intervention in place. And we've matched each of these interventions with a control group to determine the impact of these interventions on natural land cover and changes over time. Next slide. So we've integrated various parameters into the model. We have all these details on the intervention, so type of intervention, years, total investment. We also have a lot of climatic variables, including drought index and also mean spring temperature. And finally, various site level parameters like protected areas already within that county, number of roads within the county, population, elevation, and slope. Next slide. And we can begin to start to look at this return on investment. So on this horizontal axis, or the x-axis, we see total investment in millions across these 5 major intervention types. And on the vertical axes, or the y-axis, you can start to see this change in natural land cover. And we're seeing a positive trend across all of these intervention types pretty much, especially with forests, where we're avoiding land degradation, and also in agriculture areas where we are reducing land degradation. Next slide. So we've taken all of this information and we've integrated it into a Shiny application tool to eventually put it into trends.earth. And you can, in the first tab, next slide please, and next slide again. We can just look at this base level data, that 1987 data to 2020. On the tabs on the left-hand side, you can select which funding organizations you might be interested in. So you could just select the GEF, for example. And then in the panel, the figure on the top left, you can see total investments across the major response hierarchy and across time. And then in the right-hand panel in the upper right, you can see the effect of those different types of interventions across the intervention type and compare it to the controls. And then when you scroll down, you can start to break down these parameters that I mentioned in the model. So here we have represented the drought index, and you can compare the intervention again to the control groups to see where those kind of key thresholds are across each of those parameters. Next slide. And then we begin to forecast. So in this slide here, you can see on the left-hand side, you can toggle. You can input total amounts, investments that you might want to put across the hierarchy. So let's say you want to put 150 million into avoid land degradation for the next 10 years. You can then determine number of projects that you want to allocate that money across. And you can, again, compare the intervention groups versus the control groups to try and find that sweet spot of how much to invest. And then, again, you could scroll down and break down each of those parameters of the intervention versus the control. Next slide. And then finally, we're starting to incorporate this sort of choose your own adventure, where you can determine what type of intervention type you're interested in, total investment, start date, end date, and then expected change in, say, climate or population that you might expect at the site you are interested in, to try and help you make better informed decisions with your investments. Next slide. So the next steps are to integrate those other indicators of biodiversity and socioeconomics, and then determine the overlap across all 3. We also want to get a little bit more information on the habitat types, and then continue to enhance these base models to better our forecasts and extend this work globally. With that, I will thank you.
5 minutes, congratulations, you won. So thank you very much. We have still 8 minutes. We know that at 3 p.m. there is an important session of the CRIC about the GEF decision. So we need to be here. So I would like to open to say that the coffee break is going to be open. So if you want a drink or coffee, it's okay. Of course, I will be very pleased to take a round of questions and then very specific responses. Of course, there is one comment I would like to make. It's a comment I already made at the last real meeting I had under the GSP3 with the Africa region. When I'm seeing all these, fancy tools, so easy, and when I'm seeing actually all the IT and database experts in your countries, very young people, very bright, using, I remember there was one guy from Madagascar and one guy from Sierra Leone going so fast on the computer that they did the reporting like that, I guess we are almost done. I guess the level of enabling activities should not increase, but should decrease, actually. This is the point with IT tools. It's not to spend more money, it's to find economy of scale. So I guess we should reduce the level of enabling activities because the technology is here. And I'm sure that you will agree with that. Of course, it's of course a provocative comment to have some reaction and feedback, but please, if you can read the end. Yes, please.
Hi, Jean-Marc, thank you. I'm Ingrid. I'm working with WCAT, and also here is Aurélie from FAO. And I just wanted to mention that together, WCAT and FAO, we have been working with many countries through GEF-funded projects on improving and integrating the national information to monitor progress towards LDN. And very briefly, I would like to invite you today. We have an event organized by Ecuador, where Ecuador, Turkey, Kazakhstan will show and present what we have been doing to include the national information and improve the information that is used for the report and how it will be used for Prize 4. And also Alex mentioned that we are working together in Tools for LDN project and in Colombia, and tomorrow there is also a side event where we will also show the Tools for LDN framework and its application in Colombia. So since we do not have much time, I think it was important to give this invitation to follow up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other? Yes, please.
Thank you, Chair. My question will be directed to Mr. Buhari. I'm a delegate from South Africa. Thanks for a very wonderful presentation. I would like to know what will be the processes for country member states to access support with this civil society organizations and mobilizations. Thank you.
Okay. Maybe we can take 2 or 3 and then we... Yes, please.
Thank you, John. I think this has been a wonderful presentation from Nanza, from Alex, and from Brian, and also from Trent's Art. We are in the process of improving, or rather reporting for 2022 on the UNCCD. You have appointed, or rather you have recruited some experts to join us to help to assist countries in the reporting process. I wonder whether, like in my own country, Sierra Leone, where I come from, as the UNCCD focal point, Tom Kenboy, who has been recruited to work with us. I want to suggest, Trent, that we have more interaction with Tom so that we'll be able to have accurate reporting, because he is way out there in Bonn, we are way down there in West Africa, and the internet flow is really not most times very correct. But that if we are having weekly engagements, it will help us tremendously to see how we can meet the deadlines for the UNCCD reporting for 2022. I think that's my own candid suggestion. And I also want to thank IUCN. Indeed, we really have to move from LDN targets now to see how we could translate the LDN targets into actions. So I would be very much happy if he would engage us over the internet or maybe on a one-on-one basis before we leave Abidjan. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I guess it's a very important point, and I would like really that we keep that in mind. LDN target, yeah, I guess for this convention, there was before the LDN target and after, and really we need to think about what is the next step for the LDN targets, not only for implementation, but also for monitoring, for storage, for comparison, and also for endorsement in the countries. You know, which level? Is it a scientific data? Is it a technical work? Or is it going to be endorsed by the, you know, highest level of government, development, finance, economy, or agriculture, of environment? One more point, and then I will give the floor to the panel. Yes, please.
Oui, merci beaucoup, Jean-Marc. Oui, ma question, c'est... Bon, je me présente d'abord. Oui. Je suis Rémi Mukongo. Je suis de la communauté je travaille à la commission de la communauté économique des États de l'Afrique centrale qui est basée à Libreville. Oui, donc je voudrais savoir, ma question s'adresse d'abord à vous, peut-être à tout le monde, hein, c'est-à-dire à vous, à Madame du mécanisme mondial et M. Abouari aussi de l'UNEP. Bon, parce que je voudrais savoir l'implication, parce que la mise en œuvre de la Convention n'est pas seulement au niveau des États, donc au niveau régional aussi, nous avons des obligations d'accompagner les pays dans la mise en œuvre de cette Convention. Et nous savons qu'il y a par exemple, depuis 2008, pour la CEAC, on avait mis en place un programme, comment on appelait, le plan d'action sous-régional de lutte contre la désertification, où il était bien mentionné que le mécanisme mondial, la COMIFAC et la CEAC devraient être comme organes de liaison qui devraient accompagner les pays dans la recherche de financement, dans le renforcement des capacités. Bon, ma préoccupation en somme, c'est de savoir, parce que tout ce qui est présenté ici, je n'ai pas vu vraiment la place des organisations régionales. Alors je ne sais pas comment nous pouvons procéder pour nous faire inscrire dans ce processus. Merci.
Je vous remercie. Donc je vous donne la parole peut-être à Adamou en premier. Je pense que la question de l'Afrique du Sud lui était destinée, ou comment dans les pays ils vont associer la société civile dans le processus du rapport. Tous ces aspects de participation sont financés dans le cadre des Umbrella Projects. Donc Adamou.
Merci, Jean-Marc. Thank you so much. For the CSO, when I did my presentation, you see the first block of the second block of activities, which is engagement of key stakeholder. I particularly mentioned the CSO. It has been in the last 2-3 reports emphasized that the UNCCD convention will not welcome separate report from the civil society. They should try, the national focal point and the CSO, to try to work as much as possible together so that the country report reflects also the vision and the work of the civil society at the country level. And that's why, since the GEF has been providing the resources, it has been insisting, and one of the criteria is that the civil society should be involved in the development of the reporting. But now if you are referring to separate project for civil society, I think GEF has a small grant program, which is a mechanism that provides the resources and for the civil society organization. But also there's a kind of move whereby a good SGP project can be scaled up to a medium-sized project, and that can be discussed with the national focal point and the agency that the country would like to use. I think that's okay. Thank you. Just for regional, for my colleague from the COMIFAC region, the Central African region, I think previously there was a clear recommendation from the COP that will support the regional action plan. And the GF has supported through UNEP development the regional action plan. So just to tell you that, as Jean-Marc mentioned it at the beginning, we respond to the guidance of the convention. If it is a special request from the convention that will support the regional entity, then we don't have no choice, we'll do it. So we really want to see a clear guidance from the convention on how we're working with the regional entity. But there's other processes that we're working with the regional entity, like for example, in the SEALs, the UNCCD is mobilizing resources. They have requested us to support them to develop a regional project. And we can do the same with you if you're interested, and we can explain to you, and even Munaza can show you how it is can happen. Thank you.
So thank you very much. I guess for the specific questions about, the networking and contact between the specialists in your country and the different presenters, maybe we can address that bilaterally. It will be easier. So I would like to thank you again. Thank you again for coming. Thank again for all the presenters and the panelists. It was very useful. A round of applause for all of us. Thank you very much. Please help yourself. There is some food, I hope. Some coffee, some drink, I hope. Please look at the table on the right before getting out. And thank you very much again. Bye.